Welcome to Yoga Teachers Masterclass Series 3. I'm Paula Mitten, and today I'm speaking to my good friend Jennilee Toner. Jennilee Toner is an internationally recognized teacher of yoga and human anatomy. She's the author of The Perfect Chaturanga and the creator of Hot Warrior Yoga. And Jennilee has been practicing Hatha and Vinyasa Yoga since 1996, and her teaching journey began in 2003. She's been working with yoga teachers worldwide on both 200 and 300 hour trainings over the past 10 years. And I'm absolutely delighted to have you back on the show again, Jennilee. So welcome.
Yes, I'm very excited to be part of Series 3. Woo!
Yes. And this series, it's all about teaching beyond the asana and really how we can keep alive the ancient traditions of the practice. And so we know, anybody who's watched Series 1, Series 2, that you have a deep knowledge of the physical practice and the body and anatomy and all of that, but you also have this great love and knowledge of the philosophy, the mythology, right? So I want to dive into that today, and I'd love to hear more about the mythology of the asana, how you merge that, or like bring it into your teaching, bring it into your classes and your workshops, and impart the knowledge onto your students.
I'm super excited to share that with you as well. I've always been interested in the myths of the asanas. I have a master's degree in mythological studies, and I just love the layering, because we've talked about layering, and the deepening of the asana that comes with knowing, like, where does this asana come from? The name of the asana. What's the intention behind it? Where is the emphasis when it comes to like the like kind of a feeling tone to the asana? Asanas there's basically 4 categories to asanas. So it can be your human body limbs, it can be objects in nature, it can be sages, okay? But also poses are named after deities, and deities have these stories. Like, for instance, one of my favorite ones to teach a lot of the students and the trainees is Anjaneyasana. A lot of people don't know that Anjaneyasana, this pose of devotion, is actually Hanuman before he was Hanuman, when he was Anjani, right? And he was this little demigod, okay? He had all these little powers, and he loved the sun so much because he thought it was a mango in the sky, and the mango was his favorite fruit, right? So anyone trained with me knows this story, okay? And he loved it so much. So when you think of Anjaneyasana, low lunge, and so much oomph from the heart space, so much devotion, he thought that sun was his favorite fruit, and he wanted it so much that he eventually used his power to catapult off the planet to go take a bite out of Surya, the sun, yeah? And because of that, he got knocked down, he got punished, you know what I'm saying? He became Hanuman, he lived with the monkey gods, and there's whole other tales that go with that. The split, Hanumanasana has its own tale, But when you know the story behind the pose, all of a sudden it's like, what are you so devoted to in your life? You know what I'm saying? I used to have this 1970 Buttercup Dodge Dart, okay? And I loved that car so much for a period of my life when I had it. And I remember being in that pose and talking about, like, what do you love so much? Your mate, your kids, your dogs, your God, whatever it is. Maybe it's your car. And I would always laugh because I was devoted to my car at that point. I loved this car, and I loved it as much as Anjani loved the mango in the sky that he got was that, So the pose takes on a different kind of feel. Like we talked about Sanskrit, layering on Sanskrit, and it gives this beautiful poetry to the poses and the sequences of the poses. But the myths of the asanas can do that as well. It takes you on a journey inside yourself, because Anjani is us, you know what I'm saying? Hanuman is us. So then when you know Hanuman's story with the split, or hero pose is also dedicated to Hanuman. It's like, if you know the mythology, all of a sudden you embody the pose a little differently,
Yeah.
And I love that. I kind of get off on that. It makes me excited, and it never gets old. Like, you can see me right now. Telling that story of Anjani never gets old.
Right. It's like it brings the pose to life. And especially as teachers, if you're teaching something every single time you come to the mat, you're teaching the same poses, it gives you, it gives the pose more life, more interest, and gives you more things to to talk to about with
Yes.
your students, right?
Yes. And it reminds us, like, you know, because you might know that story, keep practicing, and one day on the mat, 10 years into your practice, 20 years into your practice, all of a sudden you're in Anjaneyasana and you remember the story. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, like I'm always reminded of these things and be like, oh, I remember I taught like that, or I used to teach like that, or I taught this pose that way, or oh, remember the tail? And then again, yes, it brings in that deepening. It's a whole new experience because you're a different person with different things that you love and that you're devoted to. It's a nice reminder of, oh yeah, this is why I still love yoga so much.
And it's not just like, so you might use it with individual poses, but like you've actually done workshops or retreats all around the mythology, right?
Oh, yes. Well, we've done one together, you know what I'm saying? And we brought in a little Greek mythology, which is universal. Once you know, and you can able to take mythologies of any cultures and bring them in and see Hanuman, see Shiva, see Vishnu, and the energies of Shakti and Saraswati, all these energies, these archetypal energies, these universal energies, and then you can bring other cultures in, right? And then you can do the asana poses and be in Greece and bring in their mythology, you know what I'm saying? Because there's always going to be a similarity. We all know devotion, okay? All cultures know devotion. But you have to start with, if we're practicing asana and where this comes from, it's nice to learn the mythology, you know? I'm a big fan of that.
Mm-hmm. And where do you recommend the teachers start to learn more about that? Because I know you've studied it in detail, but if you've teachers who haven't really dived into any of that yet, where do they start?
Well, there's a great book, and I love the book. I can tell you what the cover looks like. It's called Myths of the Asanas. It's a purple cover. Okay, if you Google it, it will come up. Kavalya is the woman's name. I can't remember her second half of her name, but she's amazing. And this book is a collection of stories, Myths of the Asanas, very applicable. You can use it in any class. You can do a whole series, Sunday Myths of the Asanas or something like that. And you can really pull out these stories and use them in your class. And she clusters them nicely. Like for instance, that Anjaneyasana, Virasana, and Hanumanasana, all three of them for Hanuman, and she clusters them nicely. So it's easy to bring them all together in a class.
Very good.
Otherwise, you look at the like Hindu mythology, or you look up everything on Google and Wikipedia, but you can be overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to know, like, if you start to do that kind of research, you'll get the mythology, yeah, but then you'll be like, wow, there's contradictions out there. Because when myths were told, it was in the era they were told in, for the purpose of that era. So you always have to take in consideration. Like someone like Durga, sometimes she rides a tiger, sometimes she rides a lion. Why is there differences? Yeah. Well, at some point, lions were no longer in India. So if she's on a lion, it's a very old Vedic tale, versus her on a tiger is a representation of a newer Durga tale, right? So it's kind of knowing the historical context as well, right? Because you can be overwhelmed. This one was with this one, and then they were with this one, you know? So it's nice that someone like Kavalya has already done that and put together a book, and especially for yoga asanas, because there's so many myths out there that might not be about the asanas, and she wrote a book for just that reason for us.
That's amazing. Yes, yeah, it's really good. And I like that idea of making it, you know, for the time that you're in, right? So it's a bit like I hear you talk about this a lot. So the different yogic texts and how they're ancient, and yet you can make them so relevant for the time that you're living in right now. So like, I've heard you talking about lots of the different texts in that way. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because we've also done a retreat all around the sutras.
I know. And I've done that similar process that we did on that retreat, where you gather a group of people, okay, and it's usually maybe in an advanced training, but if you can grab gather a group of yogis, and you get them each to bring their own copy of the sutras, or the Bhagavad-Gita, or even the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, right? There's less copies of that and commentaries of that, but there's many of the sutras and there's many of the Bhagavad-Gita. And the thing about it is everyone bring this different commentary, and then you go around one by one and you read the same sutra or the same passage, but in different voices, different translations with different commentaries. And then this group gathers that they might like the sutra that was in their book, but the next sutra, they like the one from the book across the room, right? And all of a sudden we're having this interactive, debate, but more like a chewing up of this text, and we're conversing, and we're like disagreeing and agreeing, and trying to figure out like, how is this applicable in our day as a urban mystic. I love that book, Yoga and the Path of the Urban Mystic by Darren May. So when I say that urban mystic, it comes really from that title. It's like, we're not in the cave, we're not in the forest, we're here in the world. So how do these old ancient texts of yoga, how are they relevant, right? And a lot of people will say that they're not. A lot of people come from schools of thought that the sutras are for monks and not for the urban mystic, the modern day yogi, or the Bhagavad-Gita, or even the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And I say no, or I say yes. I just think they're so relevant if you dive into them, right? If you dive into them and you sit with them and you let them work you, know what I'm saying? Or you get with a group of people and we work it together, because they really are relevant. But how can you do what they say in the world that you live in, And this comes back to mythology, if I could share something, okay? So Parvati, okay, she was a householder. She was Shiva's wife, yeah? Householder, wife, mother, okay? Maybe she had a job, a full-time job, who knows, right? Other than being a wife and a mother. Maybe she also had something outside the household, right? So she lived and worked and cleaned and cooked and raised the children, whatever she had to do, right? She also was a yogi, an established yogi, and found time to meditate, to read all the ancient texts, to practice, to study, all of that stuff. So we have this mythological creature, gorgeous creature, that we can say, okay, it all can be done. Shiva sat on the mountaintop meditating, right? But his wife, she was an established yogi okay? And so that we can do that too. There are ways that we can do these deep practices and study them and bring them, especially as yoga teachers, bring the teachings into the classroom, right? And still, kind of find that balance between the two.
Right, because that's, anyway, the way the texts were meant to be studied, and like take one sutra or one piece and go deep. And I think a lot of the time, especially when we do 200-hour, it's a little flat. We just cover a small amount, and we don't really go that deep. So it's nice to hear the different ways that we can start to really look at it in more detail.
And it's funny because there's so many secrets, there's so many fantastic little gems, but they're in the books, and just like I would think, like, even at times when I've tried to read the Bible from the beginning, it's like, I can't even get through all the names of the people who are the mother of the father and the daughter, because it's to get through that, it's like the gateway, right? Where the crocodiles are sitting in front of the tomb. Like, are you worthy to go deeper, to get the gem? So you have to sit with it, and you have to chew on it. You have to disagree with it. Then you have to go a little bit deeper to agree with it. But the gems are in the books, And if you only read the first chapter or the first paragraph or even the first pada or the first section, you're just not going to get to really these fantastic things that they were doing way back in the day that we might not think about in a 200 or 300 or in our local community class. We have to kind of go deeper and say, wow, they were doing this for their journey was to be one with God, to be just for self-realization, to know thyself so deeply. And these were the couple of the pathways that were laid out to do that, But if we only read the beginning, we'll just never be able to be like, oh, maybe I'll try that. Some of the stuff you don't want to try out. I don't want to try out. Very intense stuff going on. But some of the stuff, it's like, oh, I never thought of that pranayama, that mudra. I never thought of thinking about concentration in such a way, or mind fluctuations in such a way, or my asana, my seat, being a warrior, all those things that those ancient texts talk about.
Yes. There's there's a difference between the different texts that you're talking about. So some of them dive much more into the different breathing pranayamas and different mudras and things, right?
Yeah. So you have the sutras. I love for, the 8 limbs for study of the mind, but I love it for concentration, right? And absorption, and where you can go with that, right? So establish your seat, do your pranayama, but really you want to make sure, withdraw your senses and concentrate. It's all about like focusing the mind, that one pointed focus, right? It's so intense. And I love the sutras for that, okay? I love the discipline of the sutras, like sit and focus the mind and become one, right? The Bhagavad-Gita, I love the Bhagavad-Gita because it gives the options really for the modern day yogi. Like bhakti is a path, love and devotion. Karma yoga, selfless service, is a path. Jnana yoga is a path. Okay, study the Raja yoga, study the royal path of intense study. Right? He's giving Arjuna, Krishna giving Arjuna, like there's these paths to it, you know what I'm saying? And then there's the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is, we're teaching Hatha Yoga. And there's so many yoga teachers that have never read the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the 17th century text, which it's just awesome to say, look at this ancient text. We practice these poses. We practice this pranayama. But this is why they were actually doing it, and seeing as it's laid out, like, this is why they were actually doing this set and this set and the mudras. And the mudras that we think, like all the hand mudras, it's not what it is in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, right? I'll leave you with that. You all want me to do your own homework. But the secrets in chapter 3 of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it's nothing like we talk about the seals as with asana poses. It's a completely different story.
And so do you recommend that teachers can study many of the different texts, or they should stick with one? Like, what would you say if there's teachers who are trying to start incorporating this and diving into it a little bit more?
I love them all, and I think those 3, I keep mentioning those 3 because there's so many more. I mean, you have the Vedas, the Upanishads, you have many different scriptures out there, or ancient texts. These 3, I really feel they're accessible to us yoga teachers. We can work with these 3. Right? Yoga Sutras, especially for the mind. Bhagavad-Gita, to be in the world, being a yogi in the world. And then Hatha Yoga Pradipika, if you're a yoga teacher of asana, it's necessary to read that book. You know what I'm saying? And to be, it just deepens your awareness. Like, where does this come from? Right? And there's these little gems in each book. I'd say there's probably at least 5 gems, like sentence structures that you could actually bring into any yoga class. I mean, really.
Because that's what I was going to ask you, because you were talking about like sitting and discussing and all of that, but you also bring it into a physical class. Yes. Like, because I've heard you.
So, one is, this is great. It's like, so you show up to teach a class, okay, and everyone's chatting, right, in the class. Like, so they're chatting because they're excited to be there, and maybe it's that kind of studio that holds that space for community chatter in the studio room, right? Some people it's just like in the foyer. You walk into the studio, it's silent. Some people it's in the studio room itself. There's a lot of activity, right? So when you come in to teach, and it takes a while to corral them into like centering on their breath, to be quiet, to go within. I love it's almost very dramatic, right? And you say this line, and I teach my teacher trainees to say this because you never know when you're going to need this, okay, this tool, okay? Because in order to gather them and to come within themselves, you could say, Atta Yoga Anushasana. Now is the time for yoga, right? And then that kind of is like commands the room, right? And then yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, right? Chitta vritti nirodha, right? And you say, yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. How are you ever going to seize the fluctuations of your mind if you cannot seize the fluctuations of your lips? You know what I'm saying? So that one always just rails everyone right into that. Oh, okay. If yoga is about being quiet, quieting, going within, the union of mind, body, and breath, it's like these have to seize Then we can work on these seizing, and then that oneness with clarity and stillness. Yep. So you can always learn these sutras or learn lines from the Bhagavad-Gita or the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Usually from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, you're going to have more themes. Like you can teach a whole class on one of the themes. But that goes for the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad-Gita as well. You can do a thematic class, But I find the sutras and the Bhagavad-Gita have more lines that you could actually bring in as a yoga teacher and really start to make a difference in the climate of the room, the feeling of the room, and it brings it right into like, yes, we are here for this hour to 90 minutes, 2 hours to practice yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And, do you find that by incorporating the more traditional part of I say traditional, but like we know the asana is there, but it's just that we focus on it so much, but the other sides of the practice that then students can be more mindful outside of their hour and a half.
Right. Especially I love, when you start really diving into the yamas and niyamas, we did that in the 200, but if people can remember, don't just leave it in the 200, right? There are, these moral observances and practices. Yeah. And in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, there's actually 10 yamas and 10 niyamas. There's even more. And they have words like forgiveness. I mean, we don't have that in the Yoga Sutras. So there's another layering in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika of these yamas and niyamas. But we can teach our students, through rolling up the strap, putting things away, showing up on time, not stealing. There's certain ways that we can make it practical. And I don't know if anyone's mentioned that book by Deborah Adele, that Yamas and Niyamas book. She does a great job, as other authors, modern authors have, of making the yamas and niyamas practical, like in modern day society. Like we look at satya as truthfulness. Well, let's dive into what truthfulness means. What does ahimsa, nonviolence, mean? What does a parigraha mean? But then we can take those themes into our classes. I remember I had a friend who taught years ago. She called it Sutra Sundays. Yeah. So and every Sunday they would go through 1 or 2 sutras. Okay. And then I think after that, they might even went into Gita Sundays, right? We can do that with the yamas, the yamas and niyamas Sundays, or you can do 1 yama a week, 1 niyama a week. And especially if you do the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, now you got 20 to work with, right? But we can take these things and it just gets them to be like, oh, then again, I know I'm repetitive, but like, where does yoga come from? Oh, it's kind of like you want them to be like, this is super cool. I like this. I like the depth of this. I like how I feel. And now I'm getting a glimpse of the backstory of where this is all coming from. Okay?
Yes.
And that's what I get excited about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you say the depth, because that's really what we want to start to offer. And I think it's something that I hear a lot from teachers. They worry that, they don't want to be teaching something that's just on the surface, or that could be seen as just a workout, but they want to introduce more depth and more of that, the background behind the practice.
Right. And, and I love teaching a rockin' kick butt vinyasa. I do. I love that. Right. And then in the beginning and the end, somewhere in the middle, you bring them back to the heart space, you infuse a quote, you bring in a sutra, you bring the energy of the poses and the beings behind the poses, because there's these moments where you can just catch them. Even in a hot rock and vinyasa class, you just catch them, and it's such a soulful moment where now we can bring up where this comes from and where it's going. Because that's the thing, yoga is alive. It is not dead. And it's because we can agree, disagree. We can dive into these old texts, chew on them, right? And spit them out if we don't like it. Okay, swallow it if we do like it, right? But it's alive, and it's not a dead religion. It's not a dead language. It is real. Okay. Look at the statistics. How many people are practicing? How many people are buying the books? I wonder what that's even it. Like buying the books on mythology, buying the books on the philosophy, the meditation groups. Where is it going?
Yeah. Yes.
Because asana, we're doing it. I love asana. But how can we layer this stuff in our asana classes? Another thing I was just going to mention is, if you're a yoga teacher and you're kind of even finding it hard to introduce this stuff in your classes, maybe, because this is one of the homeworks for my latest training, they have to do a book club. They have to lead a book club, facilitate it on certain texts. And you could pick up these texts and do what I suggested, get everyone to pick a different commentary, go line by line, in a book club, you might pick one book per meeting. Something like this, you might want to have 4 meetings per, for the Yoga Sutras per pada. I'm saying one, like you might just want to make it more lengthy. But this is kind of exciting work that you can dive deep with your students, your trainees, your colleagues, your coworkers, stuff like that. A book club.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, those would be my parting words. Start a book club, yoga book club.
I love it. And I feel like you were saying it's the golden moment, those moments just in a rocking class. It doesn't have to be that you don't have to be constantly giving the information, but it's just little nuggets throughout the practice that bring it to life, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yay.
It starts with us. So like if we're not feeling it, if it doesn't resonate with us, it would be empty. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't resonate. So I also suggest like for us to be doing this work for ourselves first, you know what I'm saying? Right. Because if we're excited about the mythology, or if it really touches us, certain lines or certain scriptures or certain ancient texts, then we're going to be able to bring it in a little bit with more ease, even if we're scared in the beginning. If it resonates with us, it will be easier to bring it into the class, to teach it, and for them to feel something, It has to start with us.
Yes, that's where the book club comes in.
Yes. When you have a book club, make sure you read the book first. Okay, don't read it with them. Okay, make sure you've done your research, because just like preparing a class, like I always say, like we don't want to just like eat our oatmeal, watch a little YouTube about a pose, and then try to go teach the pose. Okay, we've all been there. We all have fallen flat on our face. So you the same thing with the book. Make sure you read the book, okay? Come up with the questions, and then go start that book club.
I love it. Thank you so much. So Jennilee, for people who are looking to see more on what you're doing, where's the best place to find the information?
Oh,
your website, your Facebook page?
I hang my head and shake. Right, hang my head. Mostly, like I do the best I can on Facebook and on Instagram, and I have my website jennileetoner.com. But I'm woefully just kind of plugging along here. I'm actually in acupuncture school right now, so traditional Chinese medicine. So right now I'm in school, which is exciting. I'm very excited. And I'm excited about learning Chinese mythology. I'll be bringing that into the classes next.
So good. So thank you so much. I'm going to finish up there, and I will talk to you very soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paula. Love you.
You're so welcome.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.